Corruption has been a persistent issue in both Russia and Ukraine, deeply embedded in their political, economic, and societal systems. However, the dynamics of corruption have shifted significantly before and after the Russia-Ukraine war that began in 2022. Corruption in Russia before the war. Systemic corruption. Corruption in Russia has been entrenched within its political and economic systems, with oligarchs, government officials, and state enterprises benefiting from a lack of transparency and accountability. Kleptocracy. Russia has been described as a kleptocracy, where wealth and power are concentrated within a small elite circle close to President Vladimir Putin. Key areas of corruption: natural resource exploitation, especially oil and gas, defense spending, and public procurement have been major areas of corruption. Limited freedom of press, independent journalism, and anti-corruption efforts were routinely stifled, with figures like Alexei Navalny bringing international attention to the issue. After the war, increased military corruption. The war amplified corruption in the Russian military, with reports of embezzlement, poor equipment quality, and mismanagement of funds meant for defense. Economic strains. Sanctions against Russia have created new opportunities for corruption as officials and businesses seek to bypass restrictions. Suppression of dissent. Anti-corruption activists and journalists have faced even harsher crackdowns as the state tightens its grip on information. Corruption in Ukraine before the war. Oligarchic influence. In Ukraine, oligarchs wielded significant political and economic power, often controlling media outlets and influencing government decisions. Judicial corruption. The judiciary and law enforcement were frequently accused of being corrupt, undermining public trust in the legal system. International pressure. Ukraine's efforts to combat corruption were often driven by international pressure, especially from Western nations and institutions like the EU and IMF. Anti-corruption reforms. Despite challenges, Ukraine made strides in anti-corruption reforms, such as creating the National Anti-Corruption Bureau (NABU) and the High Anti-Corruption Court. After the war efforts and transparency, the war shifted priorities, with significant international aid and resources flowing into Ukraine. This increased scrutiny and pressure to prevent misuse of funds. National unity and reform. The war has fostered a sense of national unity, leading to renewed efforts to tackle corruption, though challenges remain. Continued oligarchic influence. While some oligarchs have lost influence, others remain powerful, and corruption risks persist in areas like reconstruction and defense spending. Key differences. Post-war Russia. Corruption deepened as the regime became more authoritarian, with resources funneled to sustain the war effort and elites tightening their grip on wealth. Ukraine. While corruption remains a challenge, there has been increased international oversight, pressure for reform, and a stronger public push for transparency and accountability in light of the war effort. Conclusion. The war has exacerbated existing corruption in Russia, while in Ukraine, it has created both challenges and opportunities for reform. The outcomes of these dynamics remain uncertain, but Ukraine's closer ties to the West and Russia's isolation may shape their respective paths regarding corruption.